Imagine for a moment you see a majestic oak tree. Do you immediately think genus Quercus, specific leaf-shaped branch angles, or do you just perceive tree, this basic human thing, right?
Yeah.
Categorizing, abstracting tree instead of getting bogged down in, like, birch versus pine. It feels ancient, totally intuitive.
It does.
But what if we told you it shares this really deep but also kind of paradoxical link with one of the biggest ideas in modern computer science, object-oriented programming?
Yeah, it's a fascinating connection to explore.
So today we're taking a deep dive. We're looking at an expert report that asks this, well, pretty mind-bending question. Can the way our brains, even before language, naturally grabbed onto generalized categories? Can that be linked somehow to the object-oriented programming paradigm, OOP?
And that's where the paradox really hits you. Cognitive science, it suggests this kind of abstract thinking came first, way before detailed language-based thought in our evolution.
Right.
But in computing, object-oriented programming showed up after all the super detailed machine-level stuff.
So why the different timelines? That's the big question.
Exactly.
And that's our mission here today. We want to unpack this seeming contradiction, look at the surprising ways they line up, but also the crucial differences, and hopefully, resolve this fascinating paradox.
We'll be pulling together ideas from cognitive psychology, evolutionary biology, philosophy of mind, computer history.
It's quite a mix.
Oh,
Should be some real aha moments, hopefully.
let's hope so.
Okay, let's start with us, with our brains. The sources we're looking at suggest that long before we had words for things, our minds were already, like, masters of abstraction. What's the evolutionary story there?
Well, it's critical to get this. The human brain is just constantly flooded with input. Sensory overload, basically.
Right.
So to make any sense of it, categorization isn't just, helpful. It's absolutely fundamental.
It has to happen.
It has to. Linguistic research, psychological research, it all points the same way. Grouping things by shared features is a core process, and it actually comes before language. It enables language. Without it, every single time you saw something new, it'd be like starting from scratch cognitively. A totally separate event.
Wow, yeah. Incredibly inefficient.
Hugely inefficient.
Now, to really understand how our brains pull this off, the sources mention Eleanor Roche's prototype theory. Can you walk us through that? How does it shape these mental categories we form?
Sure. So Roche's idea basically is that our mental categories aren't like rigid checklists. Does it have X, Y, and Z? Instead, they're built around a prototype. Think of it as the best example, the most typical instance of that category, a sort of fuzzy mental template.
Okay, like the most bird-like bird or the most chair-like chair.
Exactly. And then we assign new things to categories based on how similar they are to that prototype, which naturally leads to what cognitive scientists call basic categories.
I feel like your tree, chair, car examples.
Precisely. Those are the ones we recognize easiest and fastest. They hit this sweet spot, this optimal balance between being informative enough, telling a tree from a chair,
Right.
and being general enough to group lots of similar things together. It's exactly that tree idea you started with, not getting lost in birch or fir right away.
Okay, so this fundamental ability, what did it mean for us surviving as a species?
That's a really important question. Why did this pre-linguistic categorizing kind of thought come first? It wasn't accidental. It was, well, an evolutionary necessity.
How so?
Think about a dangerous environment. Quickly seeing a blurry shape and thinking predator, that generalized category, was way more important for survival than taking the time to figure out, is that a lion or a tiger?
Yeah, you wouldn't have time for that.
No time. That fast, generalized categorization, it allowed for immediate life-saving reactions. It's also just a super efficient, energy-saving way for the brain to work.
Right, freeze it up from analyzing every little detail from scratch every single time.
Exactly. And that's our first big clue about the timeline paradox. This kind of thinking came first because it was vital for managing the sheer complexity of the world and reacting fast enough.
And how deep does this go in our wiring? Is it just something we learned, or is it more fundamental?
No, it's fundamental. Neurologically, this ability to abstract is deeply embedded. You can think of the brain as this highly sophisticated pattern recognition engine.
Okay.
From day one, our neural networks are making connections, finding patterns, even in noisy, incomplete data. Abstraction isn't some add-on feature the brain learns later.
Okay.
It's baked into the architecture. It's core to how our neurons process information. And crucially, it's not just about abstract labels in our heads.
Okay, so this brings us to embodied cognition, right? That idea our sources mentioned.
Exactly.
It's not just about forming the category cup, but about how we actually interact with cups. They're like causal effects in the real world.
Precisely. It's fundamental. We understand objects through interaction, how they behave, how they feel, what happens when you do something with them.
Right, a cup isn't just a shape. It holds liquid, you can pick it up, drop it.
And it might shatter. That intuitive causal understanding of objects as things we interact with, that's going to be a really strong parallel when we get to OOP.
Okay, got it. But hang on. What about ideas like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the whole language shapes thought
Yeah.
thing? Doesn't that kind of contradict this idea of pre-linguistic abstraction?
That's a great question, and it seems like a contradiction at first glance. But if you look closer, the apparent conflict sort of dissolves when you differentiate the kind of thinking we're talking about.
Okay, how so?
Well, prelinguistic thought refers to that really fundamental evolutionary capacity. Categorization, pattern recognition, it's universal, it's neurological, it's what we need just to navigate the physical world.
Right, the basic survival stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the modern take on Sapir-Whorf, it focuses more on how language shapes our abstract propositional thought.
Like thinking about concepts, time, morality, complex logic.
Precisely those things. Language builds on top of those biological foundations. It adds detail, complexity, cultural nuances to how we name things, structure ideas, and talk about the world.
Ah, okay. So it's not that language doesn't shape thought, it's that it shapes a different level or kind of thought, building on the pre-linguistic base.
Exactly. It's not a refutation, it's more like adding layers to our cognitive processes.
Okay, that clears that up. So we've really established how deep abstraction runs in our biology. Now let's pivot. Let's look at the tech side of this paradox. How did programming actually evolve, and why did it start with all the gritty details before getting to these objects?
Right. The story of programming evolution is really driven by the technology itself, especially early on. The very first programming languages. They were basically just a direct response to the incredibly limited hardware of early computers.
So really tied to the physical machine.
Absolutely. Take assembly languages, they're machine level, almost a one-to-one mapping with the computer's raw instructions. So programming back then was literally telling the machine exactly what to do. Which register to use, which memory address, which specific hardware operation, abstraction, it just wasn't practical.
Couldn't afford it, basically.
Couldn't afford the overhead. Every command was tied tightly to the physical reality of that machine. Programmers needed this incredibly detail-oriented mindset just to make anything work at all.
Okay, so from that very low level,
Yeah.
then we start seeing early high-level languages. Our sources mention ALGOL as a key step.
Yeah.
What did that bring? What was its focus?
Yeah, ALGOL was definitely a big leap. It introduced ideas like blocks of code, structured control flow, if-then-else statements, recursive functions.
So starting to get away from the raw hardware details a bit.
A bit, yes. It allowed some abstraction away from the specific machine, but, and this is key, its core approach was still procedural,
Procedural.
meaning,
Meaning the main focus was on the algorithms, the step-by-step instructions, the computational recipe, if you will.
right, data structures. They were usually passive things, kept separate from the code that acted on them. Your program was essentially a collection of procedures, functions, that operated on data passed into them or on global data, like a recipe with separate lists for ingredients and steps.
Okay, I see. So what broke that model? What pushed computing towards something different? That procedural approach must have hit a wall eventually.
It absolutely did, and pretty dramatically. As software projects just got bigger and way more complex, especially through the 1960s, well, trying to build and maintain these huge systems with tons of separate procedures and global data all interacting, it became a nightmare.
Things got tangled up.
Totally tangled, hard to understand, hard to modify, super prone to errors. This whole mess became known as the software crisis.
The software crisis.
It was clear something had to change. A fundamentally new way of organizing software was desperately needed just to manage the complexity.
And that, naturally, leads us to object-oriented programming, OOP.
Precisely. OOP emerged as a direct and really quite elegant answer to that crisis. And its origins are telling. Simula, which is often pointed to as the first OOP language, it was developed specifically for simulating real-world systems.
Ah, simulation, like modeling ships moving on the ocean or factory processes.
Exactly that kind of thing. Complex systems with interacting parts. And that origin story is so important because it tells you OOP's fundamental goal right from the start. Create a formal, programmed representation of the real world that actually mirrors how the real world is structured.
Okay, so for listeners familiar with programming, how does OOP actually do that? What are the core ideas that let it model the world?
Well, at its heart, the big idea in OOP is bundling data and the functions, the methods that operate on that data together into one single unit, the
Okay.
object.
Data and behavior together.
Exactly. That's the core shift. And then the concepts, everyone knows the class being the blueprint, the object being the actual thing created from the blueprint.
Encapsulation.
Right. Encapsulation, which is like hiding the internal details and only allowing interaction through specific methods. Inheritance for building hierarchies and reusing code. And polymorphism, letting different objects respond to the same message in their own way.
Okay.
These aren't just technical jargon, they're the mechanisms that let OOP mimic how our brains naturally categorize and interact with the world.
How so? Like encapsulation.
Think about encapsulation. It's a bit like how our brain filters out irrelevant details. When you see a car, you focus on the actionable parts: steering wheel, pedals, not the intricate workings of the engine immediately. You interact through a defined interface.
Ah, I see. What you can perceive and interact with.
Exactly. All these OOP concepts work together to break down complexity. They structure software into these self-contained units that communicate with each other, much like our minds organize reality into interacting objects.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. We've seen how our brains do abstraction, how computers eventually got there too. Let's put them side by side. What are those specific striking parallels between our cognitive processes and these core OOP ideas?
They really are striking, almost uncanny in a way. Both systems, our cognitive system and the OOP paradigm, use fundamentally similar strategies to handle complexity.
Okay.
They both use templates, right? Whether you call it a cognitive category or an OOP class, they deal with concrete instances of the actual object you perceive or the object instantiated in memory. And they both bundle properties together, the features of a real-world object or the attributes and methods of a software object. It's all about modeling the world or the software system in a structured way.
So let's break that down. Our cognitive category, or that prototype you mentioned, that's the blueprint. Just like an OOP class or maybe an abstract class is the software blueprint.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. And the actual perceived object, that specific oak tree you see, that corresponds directly to an instantiated object in code, a real unique thing created from the class existing in the computer's memory.
Okay. And the common features we recognize in an object, like a tree has leaves or can provide shade, that maps to attributes and methods in OOP, the data and the actions associated with the object.
Precisely. Properties and behaviors. And then there's that intuitive sense of causality or interaction we have. You know, a ball hits a window, the window breaks. That finds its parallel in message passing or polymorphism in OOP.
How so?
Well, objects in OOP influence each other by sending messages, essentially calling each other's methods. And polymorphism means different objects can respond to the same message, the same method call in their own specific way, depending on what kind of object they are. It mirrors that context-dependent interaction we see in the real world.
Wow, the parallels are really strong. It sounds almost like you're saying our brains are just biological computers running OOP. That feels like maybe too big a leap.
That's a really important question to ask, and that's exactly where we need the nuance. It's a deep analogy, a powerful one, but it's not an identity.
Okay. What's the key difference then?
The key difference is that embodied aspect we talked about earlier. A cognitive object, the tree in your mind, is deeply connected to the physical world. It has a history based on your interactions, your sensory experiences. Its meaning isn't just symbolic, it's grounded in your direct physical life in the world.
Right. It's messy, real-world stuff.
Exactly. An OOP object, on the other hand, it's a formal abstraction. It's purely symbolic. It's deliberately decoupled from the physical world.
Oh, okay.
The people who created Simula, they wanted to emulate human thinking, yes, but as a tool. A tool to manage software complexity. They used our natural human ability for abstraction to design a formal, symbolic system.
So OOP is like taking our natural abstraction ability and building a formal system out of it.
You could absolutely think of it that way, like an abstraction of abstraction. It's a tool that leverages our built-in cognitive trick to create a different kind of system that formally models the world. That distinction embodied experience versus formal symbolism is crucial.
Got it.
So the association isn't identity. It's a profound analogy that really confirms OOP wasn't just some random idea. It was a conscious technological recreation of a fundamental way humans think.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we have this powerful analogy. We understand the what, but we still have the paradox we started with. Why did abstract thinking show up first in humans, while abstract programming, OOP, came later than all the detailed low-level stuff? Let's resolve that.
Right. And the paradox really does dissolve when you look at the completely different evolutionary histories, one biological, one technological.
Okay, so first, why did abstract thinking come first in us?
Two main reasons, really. First, as we discussed, evolutionary necessity. Our brains had to process the world quickly to survive. Categorization was efficient, it saved energy, it allowed fast reactions.
Predator, food, run, eat.
Exactly. Generalized processing was favored over slow, detailed analysis, because slow analysis could get you killed. No time for a detailed species identification when something's charging at you.
Makes sense. And the second reason?
Second, neurological predisposition. Abstraction isn't just a skill we learned, it's built into how our brains are wired from the start. The brain is an associative, pattern-finding machine. It naturally extracts general patterns. That's the biological foundation for everything else.
Okay, clear on the human side. Now let's flip it. Why was OB invented after all that super detailed machine-level programming? What was the holdup?
Again, sort of two key factors combined. First, technological limitation. Plain and simple. Early computers were expensive, memory was tiny, processing power was weak.
Right.
OP, well, it has some overhead. Managing objects in memory, handling polymorphic calls, it takes resources. The hardware back in the 50s and 60s just couldn't handle that efficiently.
So assembler wasn't just preferred, it was kind of the only practical option.
Pretty much. It was the only way to squeeze every last drop of performance out of the limited hardware available.
Okay, limitation one, hardware. What's limitation two?
The second factor was the evolution of problem complexity. The kinds of problems people were solving with early computers, often scientific calculations, military stuff, were largely numerical, algorithmic.
Right.
Procedural approaches, like ALGOL, were actually pretty good for those kinds of tasks. It was only later, when software started getting massively complex, needing to model intricate real-world systems with lots of interacting parts.
Like the simulations that inspired Simula.
Exactly. That's when the old procedural ways really started to break down. That software crisis wasn't just academic, it created a real practical demand for a new approach, one that prioritized abstraction, encapsulation, reusability, all the things needed to tame that exploding complexity.
So it's not a contradiction at all, it's just two different stories, two different paths, cognition and technology, arriving at a similar solution abstraction, but driven by completely different needs and constraints.
Precisely. That nails it. Cognitive abstraction was an organic, evolutionary solution to navigating the complex natural world, driven by survival needs. Technological abstraction, OOP, was a conscious, engineered solution to manage complex software systems, only emerging when the tech allowed it and the problem demanded it.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really unpacked a lot. We've explored this fascinating link between how our brains naturally categorize the world, even before language, and the object-oriented programming paradigm. And we've confirmed there's a really deep, insightful analogy there, right? Both systems are fundamentally about managing complexity through abstraction, identifying commonalities, bundling them into reusable templates, categories, or classes to make sense of the world, or a software system.
Exactly. And we've also been careful to clarify, it is an analogy, not an identity. The cognitive object is embodied, tied to our physical experience, messy reality. The OOP object is formal, symbolic, deliberately separate.
Right.
OOP is like a conscious tech version of that natural cognitive process, built specifically to solve a technical problem managing software complexity.
It's really striking that biological evolution and technological development basically landed on such a similar solution for the same core problem.
Managing complexity. It doesn't feel like a coincidence.
No, it really doesn't. It feels like evidence for a deeper truth. Abstraction is just a fundamental, powerful principle for organizing complex systems, whether they evolved naturally or were engineered by us.
Yeah. And realizing that a modern way of building software actually mimics our oldest, most natural way of seeing the world. That's a pretty powerful testament to how effective that abstraction model really is in both domains.
It really is.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other areas of technology might be, maybe unknowingly, tapping into or mimicking our fundamental cognitive processes just because those processes are so inherently good at dealing with complexity?
That's a great question to leave people with.
Something to think about. Keep exploring and keep questioning.